Talks. Welcome to the podcast. And today with me is Geoff Roberts, who is the co-founder of Outseta, all-in-one platform that helps founders to launch their SaaS or membership businesses. And he also previously led marketing teams at Buildium that eventually was sold to RealPage for staggering, and I will take my time because it's a big number, of $580 million. So welcome, and Geoff, could you please give a bit of a background?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Anna. My name is Geoff Roberts, as Anna said. I'm now co-founder of a company called Outseta, but I've worked pretty much my whole career, the last 12, 13 years in various SaaS startups. Buildium was certainly the most successful, and I still, even though I'm sort of a entrepreneur and wear lots of different hats today, I still consider myself a marketer at heart. But I sort of caught the startup bug early in my career, fell in love with the idea of taking an idea and helping it grow into its potential. And now I'm building a platform that helps other founders do exactly that.
Okay, so cool. And, it's great that you mentioned that you're also a marketer and I guess a content creator as well, because, I had to learn a bit about Outseta and I went to the website and I got just stuck there for a couple of hours just reading through all your articles. So they were amazing. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
And yeah, I also wanted to mention that you were obviously, you are doing something for exposure to get more exposure right now, and this is also how we met. And I want to give a shout out to Polywork, which is an amazing collaboration network where Geoff just responded to the opportunity to be on Mars Talks, and thank you for doing that, and thank you. Thanks Polywork for giving us this amazing chance. But yeah, you mentioned Buildium. What was it? I mean, what does sell for $580 million?
Yeah, that's part of the amazing part of the Buildium story. So first of all, I was not a co-founder of Buildium, but my now co-founder at Outseta, his name is Dimitri, also started that company. I was their first head of marketing, so that's where we met, and we've since teamed up to work on Outseta. Okay. But the amazing thing about Buildium is sort of how humble its beginnings were. So Buildium is a property management software platform. Basically, what it does is if you owned multiple rental properties and needed to collect rent from your tenants, it helps you do that. So think of it this way: if you had a single tenant and you were renting an apartment to them, it would be quite easy to know if they paid you rent or not. But if suddenly you look up and you have 10 renters or 100 renters, you need some sort of software product to help maintain sort of your portfolio of properties and collect rent and do all those sorts of things. So Buildium's beginnings were literally my co-founder Dimitri bought a rental property in Providence, Rhode Island. At first, I think he had 3 or 4 tenants. And being a software engineer, he said, hey, it would be really nice if I could collect their rent payments digitally. He wrote sort of a very basic program to allow him to collect his rent payments from his 3 or 4 tenants, started investing in real estate a little bit more. Suddenly that number swelled to 10 tenants. And he said, wow, this little piece of software I wrote completely for my own use is really useful to me. I bet other people would benefit from it as well. And he started to then make the product publicly available. Next thing you know, the company has 20,000 customers and sells for $580 million. So it's a perfect example of sort of scratching your own itch, solving your own problem, and then looking up and realizing that other people probably have that problem too.
All right, that's a very good next thing to know. So how did your story start there?
Yeah, so I came on at Buildium. It was the first real job I ever had. And to be honest with you, I just kind of walked into a good scenario. At the time, I was a writing major. So you talked about sort of content creation and me being a marketer. That's largely where that comes from. But I never really wanted to work in tech, never really wanted to work in software necessarily. But I was looking for a job and I applied at this startup. And little did I know, it was 5 or 6 people when I joined, but they had built this product that worked really well. They were all engineers at that point for the most part and didn't really know how to take this thing to the next level. So they kind of said to me, hey, Geoff, go sit in the corner and figure out this marketing thing. How can we bring this to market more broadly? Basically, you have free reign to do whatever you want. So I was given an opportunity early in my career to try a lot of things. I mean, I created social media channels. I started writing blog content. I ran paid ads. And some of the things worked, some of them didn't. But ultimately, there was a lot of pent up demand for this product, and the company started growing pretty quickly. So I was there for 5 years, and really just cut my teeth in the industry. But as part of that journey, I was kind of the business user who was going to Dimitri, the technical founder of the company, saying, we need a real billing system at this point. We need something like HubSpot for marketing automation. We need Salesforce as a CRM. We need Zendesk to help us with customer support. And we started going down this path that all SaaS companies go down, where you buy and integrate 5 or 10 different software tools just to sort of run the day-to-day operations of your business. And that's really where the idea for Outseta came from. Dimitri is kind of a stubborn guy and a software engineer, and he just said, you know what, we're an early stage company, and I'm spending an enormous amount of time evaluating all these different software products, integrating all these different software products. Why doesn't somebody just build a platform that kind of gives you all the basic tools you need to run a SaaS business out of the box? And that's ultimately what Outseta is. So when our days at Buildium were done and we were looking for something new to work on, we said, let's scratch our own itch again and sort of build the platform to launch a SaaS business that we wish existed and doesn't. So that's sort of where this all came from.
Awesome. All right. Well, so many questions. First of all, that brings me back to one of the articles you wrote. I believe it's the 5-year founder. Mm-hmm. And I believe you wrote it when you were already in Outseta. Yep. But what you wrote there was about the beauty of being like the marketing founder, basically, right? So experimenting and doing lots of stuff, not really putting a lot at risk. This is how you started with Buildium as well. So do you think a lot of founders, especially tech founders, are lacking this marketing founder? And this is something that is also a problem. Maybe, I don't know, an idea for your next adventure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see a lot, particularly in tech companies, that the founders are engineers, and in most ways that's completely logical, right? If you're building a software product, you need an engineer to build the core technology, and that's why we tend to see technical founders. But if I see anything on a day-to-day basis, it is technical founders that are struggling with marketing, who dislike marketing, who are desperately trying to find a marketing partner to come in and help them with that part of the equation. There are certainly engineers who learn marketing and are basically become good marketers, but that's pretty darn rare in my experience. I think more companies should launch with a marketing founder. At the end of the day, you really need both, and frankly, that's sort of how our own founding team came together. There's 3 of us. One is a back-end engineer, one is a front-end engineer, and then there's myself, the marketer, and we all sort of needed each other to bring this thing to market. And I think oftentimes founders are too worried about keeping all of the equity in the business possible that they don't want to bring on other co-founders. And I understand that mindset, but my sort of pushback on that is your equity is only worth something if you build something of value, and you probably need both developers and marketers to do that effectively. So I would like to see more marketing co-founders. And from my perspective, the other thing that was just so refreshing for me is if you are a marketer and you do start your own business, you can build all aspects of your customer acquisition strategy from the ground up on your own terms, sort of just answering to yourself. And why that's valuable to me, or sort of why that resonates with me, is if you walk in as a marketer or a VP of marketing or a CMO at another company, particularly if you're working for a CEO who doesn't have a marketing background, you're very quickly going to inherit whatever mess of marketing channels are already there. There's probably going to be like some sort of arbitrary target around marketing qualified leads that you need to hit. And while these things are well-intentioned, I think in most cases, they're actually not that helpful. So with Outsetted, just at a very basic level, like I don't have any goal around number of marketing qualified leads or anything like that. I actually would rather have fewer leads than more leads, and make sure those leads are super, super high quality. Like all I care about is I'd rather have 50 leads a month that have true buying intent that convert at a very high rate than being able to say, oh, we have a sales team that needs leads and I have 5,000 leads to distribute to the sales team. And you don't typically have sort of that free reign in the context of joining another company that you do if you are the marketing founder within the context of your own startup.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing this. I think that's super insightful. And I also want to bring back the fact that when you were saying, we were adding some software, some pieces to the platform, how were you doing that? Were you doing that because of the customer demand? And if that's a yes, then how did you qualify what has to go on the platform and what not? So like, how do you not go to the rabbit hole of just building whatever customers want? And the
Sure.
same goes for, for Outsetted. How do you structure that?
Yeah, so I think at Buildium and sort of how this whole idea sort of came to be, and it just in the context of startups in general, you always solve the immediate problem at hand. So it wasn't so much that I had this vision that we needed Salesforce and Zendesk and HubSpot. It was, oh shoot, all of a sudden we have 100 support tickets coming in per day. Those 100 tickets just being sent to my email inbox isn't scalable. This doesn't work. We need a system that's going to help us scale to the next level. So each new piece of software that got folded into our startup journey was sort of based on customer demand, essentially. When it comes to Outsetted, this is certainly a trap that is really easy to fall into. Like Outsetted is this huge software product. Where do you stop? Where do you sort of say, no, we're not building that feature? And the short answer in terms of the approach we took at Outsetted is we talked to a ton of founders of other subscription and SaaS businesses. And we said, what are the pieces of software that pretty much every single SaaS company needs? What are the like undeniable common denominator pieces of software required to run one of these businesses? And we came up essentially with the following. You need a billing system. You need some way to charge your customers. You need authentication. You need some way for users to log into your product. You're going to need a CRM to track all your customer and client data. You need email marketing tools to communicate with your customer base, and you need some sort of customer service tools. So help desk, knowledge base, live chat, those sorts of things. Pretty much every single SaaS company we talked to was purchasing all that technology. Those were the common tools. So we said, let's bring those together into our platform. And essentially that's the feature set. And the interesting part, I get asked all the time by our customers, prospects, et cetera. They're like, what are you building? What's coming next? What's new? The short answer is we're not really building a whole lot of new features per se. We're taking the existing feature set just deeper. So we have email marketing. Is Outsetted as good as the absolute best email marketing platforms on the market? Not at this point, but we want to slowly get there. And that's kind of our product strategy going forward.
That's amazing. So who are your users and customers? And, if I even can say users, if it's relevant for you.
Yeah. So across the board, for the most part, our customers are relatively early stage founders or at least small businesses. And they fall into a few different buckets. There's definitely SaaS companies. That's sort of who we initially set out to target. Increasingly, there's a lot of kind of no-code builders that are building membership type websites where they're charging for access to content or videos or newsletters, things of that nature. There's small agencies or freelancers who use Outseta sort of as a personal tech stack for their business. And there's also a lot of online communities. So increasingly, you're seeing people charge for access to online communities. Outseta can be a tech stack that sort of monetizes your online community. So those are kind of the different use cases, all relatively early stage businesses, but the common theme is a recurring billing component.
All right. So what kind of knowledge should I have in order to start using Outseta? Am I a non-technical founder or technical founder?
Yeah, that's an interesting part of our journey in general. So we certainly started out selling to technical founders of SaaS companies, and almost all of our early customers were developers who were integrating Outseta with their SaaS products using code. What we realized over time is sort of the all-in-one nature of the product and the fact that it's all pre-integrated is that much more valuable to less technical founders who don't necessarily have the skill set to build the perfect tech stack. So we basically took a product built for developers and completely no codified it. So you need very little technical knowledge to use Outseta today. If you can like drop a link onto a page, you can sort of implement Outseta in full.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds a lot like what Mars is going to do eventually. So yeah, we should definitely talk about it more. But what if I want something extra to what you already have in Outseta? Am I able to integrate it?
Absolutely, yeah. We have all kinds of different integration options. We have a API you can use. We have webhooks that can be used to integrate functionality with the product. We have integrations with Zapier and Make.com. So lots of options to integrate other tools as well.
That's great. So how did you come to users? What was your initial offer, and where did you find the customers? How did you persuade them to pay?
Yeah, so we definitely have sort of I don't want to call it a leg up, but advantage in the sense that we are our own target customer. Like we are a early stage bootstrap SaaS startup. So sort of by default, we know where those types of people hang out. They hang out on websites like Indie Hackers, for example. Like we know all the little communities and pockets of the internet where our target customers hang out. So we basically just started hanging out in those places, started writing content relevant to founders of early stage SaaS startups, all those sorts of things. I think the challenge for us, and certainly our early success demonstrates this, was we were trying to take the predominant behavior of a developer, which is sort of building the perfect tech stack from day one, even if it's not the best use of their time, and change it. And we were trying to do that with a early version of our product. This is back 4 or 5 years ago. And realistically, our CRM wasn't as good as the other CRMs on the market. Our email tool wasn't as good as the other email tools on the market. Our billing tool wasn't as good as the other billing systems on the market. So it was kind of an uphill battle. We were like, we're trying to ask you to buy this all-in-one platform when you're sort of preconditioned to throwing all these tools together and integrating them yourself anyways. So that was really the hurdle for us. The hurdle for us was, how do we get the product to the point where the feature set is compelling enough that people are willing to change what's become sort of the status quo behavior for them when it comes to changing a tech company? And that just took time. Outseta is a huge product. It took us really 2 years to deliver an MVP. I'd say we struggled mightily in our 3rd year. And after 3 years, frankly, we didn't have a whole lot to show for all the effort we put into the company. But year 4 or 5, and now in 6, things have really started growing in earnest. So I'm happy we stuck with it.
That's awesome. No, it's a really interesting approach because everywhere you go, you hear, hey, you should have your MVP ready in, I don't know, in a matter of hours.
Yep.
Right. So, and you took a bit of a different approach. You focused on the product, and that's what I keep hearing more and more from successful founders, that yeah, speed is great, but you still have to focus on the product.
Yeah, I think there's two important points there. One is if you look at SaaS today versus even when I was back at Buildium 10 years ago, SaaS is much more competitive and buyers are much more accustomed to high quality SaaS products. They are much less forgiving, and the bar to deliver a minimum viable product, I think, is a lot higher. The other thing is our idea specifically. So I think a lot of people that tell you like to get a product out as quickly as possible and iterate on it and learn from users and all of that are building something that's a brand new idea, something that hasn't really been seen before. And that advice is correct in that context. You don't know if this is going to resonate with people. You need to get something out there and see how they react to it. With something like Outseta, nothing that we're building is new or unique. Everyone's used email marketing software. Everyone's used a billing system. Everyone's used a CRM. It was, and we sort of made a bet that 15 years from now, people are still going to need these same tools. We think this is a durable idea. We just need to give ourselves enough time to build the product so that it's a good product. And that's part of the reason we sort of chose this idea in the first place. And we were comfortable saying we're going to devote the next 15 years of our lives to building this product.
Right. Okay. And but how long did it take for Outseta to become ramen profitable? Because you were working on the product for quite a long time. Not a lot of founders can afford that.
Yeah.
How long did it take for Outseta?
So we've bootstrapped it the entire way, and part of the reason that was viable was we all started working on Outseta part-time. I'm the perfect example. When I initially started working on Outseta, I was working on it 2 days a week, and I was consulting another 3 days a week to pay my bills and cover my own financial obligations. As the revenue of the business kind of scaled up, we all started working increasingly for cash compensation from Outseta and scaled down consulting. So I'm working on Outseta full time now. But to answer your question more directly, I told you after 3 years, we basically had nothing. We got to ramen profitable kind of in between year 4 and year 5. And at this point, we're just in growth mode.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, coming back to the fact that you were bootstrapped, and Buildium was also bootstrapped, right? So
Buildium was bootstrapped initially. Buildium, we made it pretty far to about $7 million a year in revenue as a completely bootstrapped company. But then we did start raising money and raised several rounds of funding thereafter.
Okay, and so what made you go with the same plan for Outseta?
Yeah, I think the difference, to be honest with you, is we really don't want to ever raise funding at Outseta. We made the decision to do that at Buildium. And we had a great experience with our investors at Buildium. Like the outcome was obviously good. Everyone was happy with everything that occurred. So it's not a reaction to a negative experience or anything like that. I think it's more just looking back and saying we had more fun as a company of 20 than we did as a company of 200. And we'd like to stay small and independent, sort of by design. And I also think that the ideas between the two companies were a little bit different. So the reason that we ended up raising money at Buildium is we sort of saw that there was a big opportunity cost in not raising money. We had built a customer acquisition engine that was extremely efficient, and the only thing holding us back from growing faster, and we could demonstrate that, was the ability to pour more money on the fire, so to speak. So we said we're sort of holding ourselves back artificially by not raising money, and that's ultimately why we decided to. With Outset, not that we couldn't get to that same point. I do think to some extent we're already holding ourselves back a little bit by not raising money, but we are in a much more competitive market. I don't think it's a winner take all market the same way that Buildium's market was. So we're sort of saying, HubSpot plays up market of us. We don't really view them as a direct competitor. But if HubSpot can build a $1 billion company, we can certainly build a $10 million company and run that company with a relatively small number of employees. And that's basically what's driving our strategy this time around.
That's a great approach. So how small is the team right now?
There's 5 of us working on this full time at this point, and some contractors here or there, but 5 full-time employees.
Oh, cool. And, again, coming back to your articles, there was one about the way you structure your work and the terms between all the co-founders or all the employees. I'm not sure how. Yep. How it works. But the terms that you work on with the rest of your team are pretty amazing.
Yeah, so there's a couple things unique about that. And I guess to start, I'll tell you sort of what we're pushing back on. So again, just looking at sort of the traditional venture-backed SaaS company, something we're seeing right now, like we're seeing all these layoffs all over the place, right? So there's this tendency to hire a huge amount of headcount as you kind of chase growth. What we see all too often is that extra spending, that extra body count is not really contributing to the growth of the company in an efficient way. And there's all kinds of scenarios where even if the company has, quote unquote, a positive outcome, the employees kind of lose out. Like the investors make money, maybe the founders make money, but unless you're a resounding success, all too often it's the people that put in the hard work that aren't really earning the rewards for all the work that they've put in. So that's kind of what we're trying to solve for. And there's 2 aspects of our structure that are really unique. The first one is everyone gets paid the same amount of money. There's a standardized salary. And that salary, if you work 5 days a week, is $210,000 a year. But we give you the ability to choose how many days a week you want to work as well. So because we sort of sell to the early stage startups, we want to attract entrepreneurial people. A lot of those people are going to have their own projects or startups that they want to work on. So we're saying if you want to come and work at Outset 1 day a week, you can do so. You're going to make $42,000 a year. If you work 2 days a week, you'll make $84,000 a year. If you work 3 days a week, you'll make $126,000 a year. And it stair steps all the way up to that full-time salary. That full-time salary is obviously relatively high. There's certainly people that get paid more than that in tech, but that is representative of we're trying to attract A players and people that sort of like this model, and just talented, more senior people in general. But the other part of it is the equity component. So everybody can come to Outset and work as much or as little for equity as they want to as well. There's no 1-year cliff and 4-year vesting period or anything like that. The moment you start working for equity, you start earning equity in the business. And the way that works is every single employee is an owner in the business, at least to some extent, and their equity is on the exact same terms as everybody else, the founders included. So there's no classes of stock or anything like that. So as an example, right now I am working on Outset 5 days a week. I get paid 3 days a week. So I'm making a salary of $126,000, and I work 2 days a week for equity in the business. And everybody can sort of choose their own adventure, if you will, how much they want to work for cash versus how much they want to work for equity. And how much you own of the business is based on how much time you've elected to work for equity versus how much time everyone in the business has chosen to work for equity. So if you look at all the hours in the history of Outset that employees have said, I'm working for equity, I have worked somewhere around 26% of those hours myself. So I'm a 26% owner in the business. But the equation is exactly the same for everybody at the company. My ownership stake is certainly one of the larger ones because I'm one of the founders and I've been working on the business longer, but everyone's got the exact same opportunity.
Oh, wow, it is pretty unique. And what made you do that? Is it about the responsibility, the sense of ownership?
Yeah, a few things. I think at its core, it is two things. It is a talent acquisition play. Like, we want to be able to attract really talented people. And I think the salary in and of itself is a good start, but giving people who aren't founders the opportunity to have stock on the same terms as founders is really attractive to a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity. So that's the big thing. But I think more than anything for me, it's this idea that if Outsetto goes on to become very successful, I want all of our employees to participate in the success of the business. I don't want myself to make $100 million and all the employees make 100,000. I would much rather, have everybody in the company make millions. And I think that would be a really cool thing to be able to deliver for people. And frankly, it's not me that's earned it, it's them that's earned it alongside me.
But that's a great vision. I mean, I think that there is a lot to learn. And I know that, my colleague is helping me with this podcast, and he says that we have quite an audience there. So, guys, as you know, feel free to ask any questions here, and I will make sure to ask Geoff what he thinks about it. But yeah, I have a few of my own still. So, what are maybe the cons of being bootstrapped?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So yeah, the story so far, it all sounds sounds
very
great.
dreamy.
But it takes a lot to get here. I mean, in short, just from a personal perspective, everyone on our team, as with every team, has their own financial circumstances and life circumstances and all of that. But I've made huge sacrifices to get Outsetto to this point. I was, in my late 20s, as a VP of marketing at a well-known tech company, making a huge salary. I'm still not back to making the amount of money that I was making 10 years ago, to be honest with you. So just, in order to remain bootstrapped, in order to give us time to build the product over 5 or 6 years to get to the point where we're on a nice growth trajectory, I made about 50% of the income that I probably could have otherwise. And it's not just the income, it's, if I had that additional income and I could have invested that and, bought my family a house and all those sorts of things that people typically do at that age, I sacrificed all of those things to get to this point and sort of retain the ownership in the business that I do have at this point. So I think there's a huge trade-off in terms of your willingness and appetite to actually take a step back in many ways in terms of your own compensation, your own career, and all of that. And beyond that, as you're doing that, there's no surety that this is going to work. This still, I mean, we're on a good growth path, but it's entirely possible this ends up being something that, will never be financially the correct move for me. And I don't even know that yet. And I'm 6 years into it. So I think that is one of the biggest drawbacks. I think in general, if you raise money in line with the same thinking, you just make your life easier. I've, lived with a lot of financial stress over particularly the first 3 or 4 years that we were in business. If you raise money, yes, you answer to investors. Yes, you have to kind of chase growth with a different level of aggression, but you also give yourself a little breathing room that you don't give yourself when you're bootstrapping. So I think those are probably the biggest things, but there's some other downsides too, particularly around recruiting. So I'll give you 2 examples. One is just there are, you hear about like 10x engineers. Yeah. There are a lot of senior engineers out there that at the end of the day, and this is not just engineers, it's people in general, but at the end of the day are sort of mercenaries, and they're going to go wherever they can get the biggest salary. And $210,000 is a nice salary, but there's an awful lot of great engineers in San Francisco making a lot more money than that. And they kind of look at Outseta and say, why would I work for your company for a fraction of what I could make elsewhere? And that's fine. Like the mindset that we've sort of adopted is there's people this is going to resonate with, there's people this is not going to resonate with. If you're an engineer with 20 years of experience and you want to maximize your earning potential, Outseta is probably not the place for you to do it, and that's okay. But similarly, even when it comes to recruiting, there was a woman in particular who I sort of wanted to recruit to essentially be like the CEO of Outseta. That's something I actually didn't talk about. We don't have job titles, we don't have bosses, which is another unique aspect of the business. But somebody that I thought would be an amazing leader within the context of Outseta. And typically, if you were going to go out and try to recruit someone like that, you would issue them equity as part of the incentive structure for them to come into the business. And you'd say, here's a big equity share. We can't do that at Outseta because of our model. You basically just have to come in and start working and earn your equity that way. We can't just issue you a big equity grant as a recruiting tool. So those sorts of things are certainly downsides of the structure that we use today.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned the fear of missing out, basically, right? So how do you fight it as a founder?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's hard to ever sort of get over. You know, I've seen lots of friends and colleagues sort of have careers shoot past mine over the last few years, and you certainly notice it. I think for me, the biggest thing is sort of why I'm doing this in the first place. And for me, it is about sort of individual freedom and individual ownership of my own time. I am totally okay with, making the sacrifices I've made over the last 5 or 6 years, because I'm working towards a future where I work completely for myself. I'm compensated very well. I have the upside in the business that comes from being the founder of a startup. So I'm still working towards this version of the future that I want, and I'm sort of making sacrifices to get there. If I look 5 years into my future, that is much more attractive to me than working at another company for a big salary where I report to somebody else. That's the short answer.
Right. Okay. Completely understandable. Yeah, we have actually a question here from somebody in the audience. So that's very cool. How Outseta manages to control or administer their remote staff and their actual worked hours?
Yeah.
Do you have any KPIs or?
It's a good question. The short answer is we don't. The whole model that I've described so far, both a good thing and a bad thing about it, it requires that we are very, very careful in terms of who we hire. And I would say it predicates that we hire slowly, because these are people that we are offering a relatively large salary right away. We are giving ownership in the business right away. And we do have sort of this fractional working opportunity where you can come in and just work 2 days a week. So how do we know if you're working the 2 days a week that you say you are and whatnot? The short answer is we really don't. We don't monitor it, but we try to hire very high integrity people. A lot of the people that we've hired so far, like, we've all worked together in some capacity before. I think as we bring sort of net new people onto the team, it's likely that we'll work with some of them in sort of a contracting basis first. So we establish that working relationship. We feel really good about how we work with the person and that they are a high integrity individual. But then it comes down to too, like, if, we haven't had it come up yet, but certainly as we scale, we could, if we run into problems, because we're such a small company working on such a big thing, there's really nowhere to hide in the context of Outseta. Like, you hear about these people, engineers working 3 or 4 jobs for these big tech companies. And you can maybe do that and slide by in a context of a company of 1,000 people. If you're not pulling your weight at Outsetto, it's not just me that's going to notice it. It's every single other person on the team. And there's mechanisms where we can say, just as any other company, you're not pulling your weight. We're gonna move on.
Okay, all right. That's very honest. I really like it. So, what was so far the biggest win and the biggest failure for Outsetto?
Good question. I would say the biggest failure, I think I'm sort of directly responsible for. And I would say that's when you talk about startups, everyone tells you need to niche down and focus on like one very, very, very specific audience. And we initially built the product with software engineers in mind and sort of technical founders. And I took that advice to heart. We niched down hard and basically didn't look at anything except for software engineers and technical founders launching SaaS businesses. Even when we sort of knew, and even when we sort of had evidence that it was going to be hard to sell to them initially, they were going to be demanding buyers. They had the technical skill set to build the perfect tech stack. And I think the fact that we niched down so hard is why after 3 or even close to 4 years in the business, we had not had a whole lot of success. The first like real impetus to our growth was kind of when no code builders discovered Outsetto, and software engineers kind of came back and started using the product in earnest in years 4 and 5. But I think the biggest failure was actually the extent to which we focused on that one audience probably hurt us, and we probably should have looked at other use cases or other target audiences earlier. The biggest success for me on a personal level was getting to the point where I was just able to work on Outsetto full time. It did take, I think it was about 5 years before I was sort of working on Outsetto and only Outsetto. And for me, that was just a huge day. Like, a lot of people do like to freelance. A lot of people do like to have their hands in multiple projects. I burned out on it, to be honest with you. I sort of felt like I was never able to give my consulting clients 100% effort or Outsetto 100% effort. So the day that our revenue got to the point where we were able to increase my salary to the extent where I could just focus on Outsetto fully was a huge day for me personally. And also just for the business, it was just an important milestone. So I'd call that our biggest win to date.
Okay, that's amazing and kind of pretty unusual, I'd say. But also, Outsetto operates like you said already in a highly competitive market.
Yep.
So how do you keep up with, I don't know, HubSpot that has thousands of employees,
Yep.
and what's your strategy there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are important here. So let's just talk about HubSpot because they're a well-known example. Outsetto and HubSpot in very many ways have a similar feature set today. We have a CRM and email tools and a help desk, and HubSpot even added payments recently. But realistically, HubSpot says their target market is growth stage companies. And they might not tell you this, but that essentially means companies that are doing like $10 million a year in revenue or more. We play below that. Like, we want to take you from 0 to $10 million in revenue. Give me one moment. I've got a lawnmower.
Sure.
I'm just going to close the door.
Sure. We can't hear it though, but sure. That's an amazing story. So again, I encourage you, we still have about 20 minutes left. So I encourage you to ask all the questions that you want to.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
no
kill the background noise. So we were talking about HubSpot. I think because we play lower in the market than they do, bigger companies need more advanced features than smaller companies do. So Outsetto is in many ways, I don't want to call it a stripped down version of HubSpot. That doesn't sound very good, but we don't need to have true feature parity to a lot of the features that HubSpot has. So it makes it more feasible for us to sort of build the core features that a startup really needs in the context of a small team. Can you refresh my memory on the question exactly?
Yeah, sure. But I would love to comment on that. I love the approach. I think you're absolutely right. Like a lot of early stage startups don't need too many features. And honestly, when a startup or a platform just grows with adding more features and overcomplicating stuff, it's never, I don't know, in the long run, I don't think it's a good strategy. But the question was, how do you keep up with the trends, with the competitors,
Right.
what they're doing, and like, how do you stay in the market?
Yeah, so I think targeting. So the first part was by targeting startups or a feature set doesn't need to have true feature parity. I think there's two other things that are true and are always true when you're competing against bigger companies. One is there has to be something about what you're doing that is unique. And with Outseta, like email marketing is not unique, CRM is not unique, help desk is not unique. But the combination of all these tools in a single platform is absolutely unique. There's almost no other. HubSpot is the closest, but there's really no other company that offers the combination of tools in a single platform that we do. And there's people that matters to, and there's people that doesn't matter to. But as long as there's people that matters to, that is a selling point. And that's a huge one for us. A lot of our customers are people that are just very, they care about the idea of being able to manage their entire business from within a single software tool. And that is something that we have pushed aggressively as our differentiator, and something that does allow us to compete with those other companies, because there is a buyer that's going to look at, say, Stripe and MailChimp and HubSpot and Zendesk and Intercom and say, no, I don't want to buy all those products and integrate them. I would much rather use Outseta. So figuring out what that sort of core differentiator of your product is a big part of it. And then a third piece I would say is actually how we've built the business. We get a lot of customers who come to us and use our product because they're just like, we love your ethos. We love how you're building the company. We love how you're pushing back on sort of the status quo in tech. And we want to use your product versus the alternatives for that reason. So I think those three things are kind of ultimately what has made Outseta viable.
That's amazing. Okay, and I have another question for you from the audience. What's Outseta's main goal for 2023, and what is your personal goal for the same year?
Yeah, good question. I would say my main goal is kind of three parts that are all related. I think from the perspective of the product, we are on a killer path right now. Like, we know what to build. We're building the right features. We're executing well. And certainly, like, it's a goal to continue that. But we really, in the last few years, have started to grow in earnest. And most of sort of the things I want to see us accomplish in the next year are relatively revenue related. I would like to see us first get to the point where everybody on our team can earn the full $210,000 salary if they want to. I think a lot of our employees, myself included, will continue to elect to work for equity because we're believing in what we're building and we're on a good trajectory and all of that. But I want everyone to have that opportunity to earn the full salary if that's the direction they want to go. Beyond that, we are still a small team with a pretty big customer base. I would love to see us get to the point where we can add maybe 2 more people, 3 more people to the team. We don't want it to be a big number, but I think certainly bringing some new folks in the door would be a great milestone. And we're not quite there yet, but crossing $1 million a year in revenue is something I'd love to see us do in the next year as well.
Oh, that's a great one. Okay, so yeah, and honestly, this hour went too fast. But what would be your best advice to the founders that are building a robust product and maybe doing it for the first time?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I would say it's hard to overstate how important the idea that you select is. We have a very experienced team at this point, and we sort of chose the idea for Outseta because we knew it was this big, meaty problem that we could work on for 15 years. And that was actually part of the reason we chose it. But we certainly, like, we got what we bargained for and more. Like, this is this big, meaty thing. This has taken a really long period of time to develop to this point. And I think people need to be really honest with themselves early on, like particularly if you're building a large platform, everything's going to take 2 times longer than you expect it to. Can you devote a year or 2 years or 4 years or 6 years to get to the point where you're making the salary that you were before? Like, you have to do some real honest soul searching about those things. And in a lot of instances, picking a smaller product idea that you can launch faster, that you can launch with a smaller team, particularly if you have a less experienced team, may make a lot more sense. So I would think long and hard about sort of what you're signing up for first and foremost. Beyond that, I think another thing, this is a framework that Mark Roberge from HubSpot sort of advocates for, but the idea is you need to figure out customer success first, unit economics, or basically how to acquire customers cost effectively second, and then you invest in growth third. I think if you really follow that model, you save yourselves a million headaches. Like, what we see pretty much every SaaS business do is the minute they have some success, they just step on the gas and try to grow as fast as possible, but they really haven't figured out how to make their customers successful or how to acquire customers cost effectively yet. And then churn goes through the roof and expenses go through the roof and you have layoffs and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really, really important. And sort of the thing that I advocate for more than anything in business is, I think the magic of startups is that you can do things that don't scale. And I think everyone these days is in such a rush to automate everything possible. Like, I don't have a problem with automation. There's a time and place for it, and it buys you time back and all of that. But the things that you can do to wow customers early on and build a brand that matters and just get people on your side are almost always things that don't scale. So actually sort of lean into those and stop being in such a rush to automate every little aspect of your business.
That's perfect. Honestly, I mean, talking to you makes me think about creating a special series for Mars Talks, where I just bring the speakers back as, expert speakers to on the podcast. Hopefully you'll be open to that. But it's great that you mentioned, getting into a startup is a long run. It's a marathon, right? And you mentioned 15 years, so it's been 6, 9 still to go. What's after that? Is it another exit, or how do you see the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly like 100%. I'm telling you, I will be working on this 9 years from now. I would be shocked if I was not. That is my mindset. Like, I'm already committed to it, and that makes my life a lot easier. I am a person that would tell you point blank, like, let's say I work on this for 9 more years and it's successful and gives me financial freedom and all of that. I would be happy to retire. I'm not the type that's like, I need to go out and prove that I can do this again and again and again. I'm not the type that necessarily is going to turn around and just start investing in other startups. There's lots of other things that I would like to do with my life, and I don't think I would retire and sit on a beach and do nothing all day. But I think if I had the ability to do so, I would explore things outside of building SaaS startups. Not that I don't enjoy it. I just think life's short, and I hope that 9 years from now, I'm in a position to pursue whatever I want to pursue at that point.
Oh, that's a perfect goal, I think. Oh, right. Well, I mean, that's really unfortunate, but I have to come to one of the last questions that I have for you. Is how do you define success for Outseta, at least, I don't know, in the next 5 years?
Yeah, success for me comes down, and this is not a phrase that I've coined, but the phrase is life profitability. And there's a book by a guy named Adi Pinar that I really recommend called Life Profitability. But the overarching idea is, particularly startup founders, like, we do accounting for our businesses and we know how profitable we are, how much money we're making, how good the financial side of our business is. The idea of life profitability is we should be looking at the same sorts of measures in terms of our overall day-to-day happiness. Like, if you're starting a company, shouldn't the idea behind the company be to enrich your life and give you freedom and time to do the things that you want to do and all of that? And certainly making money is part of that, right? Money buys you time back and whatnot. But throughout the journey of 15 years, I hope that I'm not, just living this miserable life so that there's a good financial outcome on the other end. So for me, success is looking at not only my own life, but the other people on our team, and fostering a workplace where those people have fierce loyalty to Outseta because they say, Outseta is allowing me to live the life that I want to live. Of course, we all have to work. They're all going to contribute hours to Outseta, but I never want somebody to not be able to chase after one of their passions because they're too busy working on Outseta. I hope we can build a workplace and a structure where people have the ability to chase down whatever they want in their life. And that's kind of what success looks like for me.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. I think it's a very sustainable approach. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And and thank you for being here. I mean, I enjoyed it immensely. Can't thank Polywork again enough to bring us this opportunity. Thank you for reaching out. It's been great, Geoff. And again, I want to bring that up. If you're open to coming to Mars Talks again, I'd love to have you here.
I'd love to come back.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything, and talk to you soon.